So today I have the privilege of speaking with and really doing an interview with a friend from my church. Elizabeth Smith, Liz, is somebody I've known and admired, though only recently did I get to know more of her story. And as I began to learn about just what's going on in her third of life and how that fits with her past and her history, I was really moved and excited. And we were just having a personal conversation. And I thought, this would be so wonderful to share with others. So I asked Liz if she might be willing to kind of talk again with me, but do it in this recorded way so that we could really share it with you. And I think this is going to be a wonderful conversation. So Liz, thank you so much for, the conversation we've had, but for the chance we'll have now to share this with others. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm excited to hear your story again and hear what God is doing in you and through you. So first of all, just thank you for being with me today and for being willing to share your story with others. It means a lot. Let me begin by just asking you, and for the sake of others, you have an amazing life story. And I know this could be like a 4-hour interview, but that's probably not a good idea. So in several minutes, could you just sort of help us to know kind of what's your history, where you're from, and what you've done with your life, and how God has been at work in your life? And then we'll sort of focus more on what's happening in the third.
Well, thank you, Mark. And I must say thanks again. It's a privilege. I feel honored to be asked to share my story with you and many others. You may hear a little accent, and of course I am from Jamaica. I was born in Jamaica in a little area called Mandeville, the countryside. I was fortunate to have Christian parents. I was the eldest of 5 children. I had 4 younger brothers, and we really had a fun childhood because of the community we grew up in, and it was a very diverse community. We had a lot of expatriates from other countries, and I really enjoyed my childhood, my young days. That was just lots of fun with lots of room to play. My parents worked for the government. And so in 1965, both of them got a promotion to relocate to St. Andrew, which is just a little above where Kingston is located. And many of you may know Kingston is the capital of Jamaica. So I went to a private Episcopalian all-girls school, and it just happens that one day I came home from work. My mom was at home because she wasn't feeling well, and she just mentioned to me, "Beth, look on the piano. Loretta, your best friend from Mandeville, sent you a letter." I reached over for the letter, and all of a sudden I had a strange sound, and I turned around, and would you believe it? My mother had a stroke right in front of my very eyes. I panicked. Here I was, the only person at home we had a housekeeper. Middle-class families do have housekeepers in Jamaica. It's part of their culture. And my dad was out of town. I quickly picked up the phone and called the physician, who fortunately came to look at my mom and assess her situation. And it turned out that mother had to be admitted to the hospital. So I, of course, went back to school. And exactly a week after, I was having lunch with some other schoolmates, and I was requested to come to the principal's office. And I then knew I knew what happened. My mother must have passed away. I was devastated because I said, I know my mom has passed away. And fortunately, someone came up to me, a girl I'd never seen before, tapped me on my shoulder and said, "What's wrong? What's happened to you?" And I said, "Oh, I think my mother just passed away." And she said to me, "No, that can't be. What's wrong? What's wrong with your mother?" And I said that my mother is sick and it's in the hospital, and I think she died. I said, "I don't know what I'm going to do. I am new here. I don't have a sister. I don't have a friend. What am I going to do?" This girl, who was a couple years older than me, turned to me and looked at me and said, "Don't worry, I'll be your sister." At that time, I got just this relief to know I had someone I could call on. Of course, I went home, and sure enough, it was confirmed my mother had passed away. So during that process, of course, was very difficult. My mother was passed away, and I being the eldest and the only girl, I had to pick up the pieces, so to speak. Yes, we had someone to help us with the housework. But actually, that death was my first tragedy, and it impacted my performance at school. I ended up repeating a grade. And I remember my dad saying to me, Elizabeth, look on that wall, that plaque is your mother's plaque. I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. Wow. And that was my mother's lifeline, and it became my foundational plaque. And until this day, I even had a special plaque made with that verse. I finished high school, and through all that process, I ended up getting a scholarship to study nursing in Canada. After working for a year at Pan American Airlines, I went to Canada, completed my nursing coursework, and returned to my country to serve. I served for a shorter time than I had expected because I had an opportunity to get a contract to come to California to be an emergency room nurse. During that process of being an emergency nurse, within 3 years, I was promoted to nursing director. I worked hard. I went back to school. I studied. I got a bachelor's degree in business, but my eye was really on that goal was to be a hospital administrator. Naturally, I focused and was determined to do that. Fortunately, I actually was promoted within 5 or 6 years working at the hospital to be one of the assistant administrators of the hospital. I then actually went back to Pepperdine University and got an MBA. I really enjoyed my job at Centinela Hospital Medical Center, which is located in Inglewood. And I excelled in that. I worked hard, and really, it's amazing because you never know what the Lord has in store for you. I ended up being the first African-American woman to be promoted to the vice president position at the hospital after getting my MBA. And I worked hard, and actually it's amazing how sometimes, although you're a Christian, you get socialized and other things in life take precedence. I was in a very good job, highly compensated, socialized with people of power and distinction. And as a result of that, I kind of swayed away from the Lord. And that was not something that I even expected would have happened. It just happened with life. And many people can identify with that. And I ended up even getting married. My marriage didn't last very long. And eventually what happened after all that process of my style being so powerful and so effective, I must say that I even was called Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Woman. And that was really, in gist, because the bottom line was the physicians used to say, Liz, we can always depend on you. You have integrity. We know when you say you're going to do something, you do it. I was recognized as being firm, but fair. 24 years after working at the hospital was sold, and my position was eliminated along with many other executives. And actually, after that year, it ended up being a process where I didn't work for the year, but I actually traveled, and the best thing happened to me. During that year, I ended up, because I was searching for the Lord after my divorce, I ended up at First Presbyterian Church of Hollywood. And as a result of that, I ended up volunteering at the Lois Lighthouse on the Wednesday clinic with Faith Health Partners. And we had this Hollywood had a partnership with Queen's Care. And we ended up actually taking an opportunity for us to share that opportunity to serve the homeless and those on the periphery that really needed both medical assistance and financial assistance, and just having someone be there for them. And I did that for a year with our parish nurse, and I really enjoyed it. And that was this experience that I had that really softened my heart. Because at first it was bottom line driven, very business oriented. The I had to be tough as a woman to be in the position I had. And sometimes that really takes away from the softness as a human being, as a Christian should be. And so that really brought that to reality for me. And I recognized what was going on around me. I never saw homeless. I never saw the underprivileged. I just was not present to that. And that 1 year of volunteering at First Presbyterian Church of Hollywood was the catalyst, if you will, that allowed me to interview at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where I was hired as the Director of Community Health and Education. And that gave me an opportunity to be mindful of process rather than result-driven, and it helped me to be more patient with myself, be more patient with others. It actually, my whole life journey has molded me into being a different person. And I think it's because God had plans for my life. That of course, he has plans for all of our lives, right? But the whole thing is, do we really know and recognize that, we may want to go in one trajectory or one way, and the Lord has other plans, and he makes things happen that we really don't understand the reason or the rationale at that particular moment. But there is a future in the horizon. And I worked at Cedars for those 7 years and really made a significant impact with the department. They actually got a national award for community service.
Wow.
Unfortunately, they reorganized and my position was eliminated. And many of us have gone through that whole process of going through the reorganization, whether it's downsize, right size, or other ways of reducing the cost for operations, which I understand. I've been in that situation. I've unfortunately had to do that to others. And then after losing that position, I really looked for other opportunities, but it wasn't God's plan. I ended up actually going back to USC and getting an executive master's in leadership to do some executive coaching around leadership. Leadership is my passion. I just feel that we all have so much to influence, of influencing others and making an impact, and being visionaries to really see what we can do to really connect the dots and what's on the horizon that can really bring a lot of reality into the forefront. And as a result of that, I got after doing my executive Masters of Leadership at USC, then I started an executive coaching business, which I really was not able to really focus on because my brother, who lived in California, got very sick, started with cardiac problems and multiple complications. I ended up, because it was in 2008, difficult to get a job, I actually ended up not really pursuing a career or working for someone or an organization, but taking care of my brother for various reasons, including he did not want anyone else to take care of him. So I took care of my beloved brother until he passed away in 2016. After my brother passed away, my eldest brother, who actually was at my brother's memorial service and did the eulogy, he was seeing a patient, as a physician, seeing a patient at the hospital he works at, and he had a massive heart attack, and he died. They was called to the situation. I flew to New York, and he's not married, and I had to make a lot of decisions. And as a result of it, because of his clinical condition, and he would not have sustained any other medical treatment, and so the decision was made, it was best for him not to terminate the struggles and suffering that he was going through. So I had to take care of his whole financial situation and all that goes with preparing a funeral, which I had already done for my other brother 3 months prior, because he wasn't married either. And so as a result of that, I really had to depend on the Lord to really guide and direct my path and so forth. And I also had to recognize the fact that I sometimes need to ask for help. And leaders need to pull, as leaders, we know we have to manage teams. And I just had to pull out all those leadership techniques that I knew from school or used when I worked to make that happen. And then my brother passed, and within actually less than 2 years after that, 2018, my brother in Florida, one of my brothers, got very ill, and I had to go down and also help to take care of him. And he had pancreatic and liver cancer, and he passed away in 2018. With all that being said, what I didn't also mention, of course, is my dad, who never remarried and was living in Jamaica, would only visit to the United States occasionally. He was at home in Jamaica alone for a while. And so I was managing his care with 24-hour care for the 4 years of his life, for the latter part of his life. He died at 92. But for the last 4 years of his life, I was managing his care with 24-hour care, managing that, managing his finances, managing all that it involves with activities of daily living. And he passed away in 2004. So with all of that said, and with the fact that I've gone through all of this, I thought, you know what? I need to, first of all, get closer to family. I'm the only one here, as divorced, no children. And I am in California, but I would like to get closer to my nieces and nephews. And I just love being around family. And so I prayed about it. And for 7 years, I've been praying about it. And my direction the Lord has given me is that I need to move to Florida. And with that, the Lord has shown me where I can be of service, because I really feel my heart is in serving others. I get much joy from doing that. And I have another company I've started called Peak Performance Leadership Journey. And that, as you say, is a journey. We're all on this journey. And I coach professional women who aspire for greater achievements, how to overcome their limited beliefs and self-doubts so that they can elevate their self-confidence and live life passionately and naturally fulfill their destiny. So I plan to take that along with me, so to speak, live in Florida. And I have some plans, and I think a lot of this has been directed by God, with selling my property in California. One of the things is to move other people's lives forward. And so I have some plans fiscally and also with my experience, my own personal life experience, my academic experience, my work experience, and my spirituality, to pull it all together. And God has a plan, and He's showing me the vision. And so that is what I would like to fulfill. So with that, I think maybe, Mark, that's kind of summarized it. I hope I did an okay job of that.
Well, again, your story is so both wonderful and hard. I'm just so struck, though, that you've experienced many hard losses, and we, if we make it to this season of life, there are often losses, of course, but you've had sort of multiple losses and responsibility. But part of what strikes me is how God used those things in your life for good, for Him and for you. So you lose, for example, your job at one point when they're downsizing, and a marriage, but you end up serving at the Lord's Lighthouse, serving people who are homeless, and God does this work in you. And again, it just seems like your testimony is so much of God's faithfulness. I love your plaque. You want to say what your plaque is again? Because I think your story is such a great illustration.
So the Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Yeah, and my mother stood on that all her life. And that is certainly what I live by. That's what I've lived by all my life. Yeah. Since the death of my mother, I had to have something. That's my lifeline.
Yeah, that's so great. It occurs to me as you were talking that, as you know, I work for the Max Pree Center for Leadership, and the work we're doing with folk in the third of life is kind of an extension of that. It's just, if we could have a completely different conversation about leadership and women in leadership, maybe sometime we'll have that, because I think you have so much to offer. But what I'd really like to talk a little more about is what you're envisioning for this next season. You mentioned closer to family, and you mentioned this work, but you talked about some other work that you really sense that God has put on your heart. And I'd love to know more about that, and so we could also share that with other folk, because it's just it's kind of amazing what God is doing with you. So would you share a little bit more about that?
Certainly. So geographically, I'm in the right place living in Florida eventually. I will be moving the end of the month. And it's in close proximity to my country, Jamaica, where I was born. Actually, an hour and 15 minutes by plane.
Mm.
And I mentioned earlier that I went to an all-girls school, Episcopal school. At the time when I went, there was a private school, middle-class kids attended it. And over the years, things have changed. So what I've recognized, and I've recently visited the school about a year and a half ago, really closer to 2 years actually. My best friend invited me because we were having a class high school reunion, plus an opportunity to meet with the classes that I had grown up there with. So I actually ended up there. And the interesting thing is that the girls that are currently going to that school are a different socioeconomic class. They are very smart because in order to go to that school, you have to pass a scholarship, you have a scholarship. And in addition to that, so it's paid for, the education is paid for. But what I learned was there's a different grade system in Jamaica, but it turns out that you can complete high school and then there's a 2-year period of time where it's equivalent to college in the United States level. So what's happening is the girls will get a scholarship up to high school, but they don't have the 2-year period as college, which is a preparation for them to go to the university or a university. So I found out that in addition to some other areas of interest I have, I found out that I can help and set up a nonprofit along with support of others. And I plan to use some of the proceeds of the sale of property to do that. I plan to have a nonprofit where I'm going to be able to help sponsor through a qualification perspective, of course, help sponsor girls going into that last 2-year period and help to give them scholarships towards educating themselves, preparing them at that college level to go into the university level and advance, preparing, because my interest is moving women in leadership, elevating women, recognizing, giving them the encouragement that's necessary, empowering them so that they will actually be able to make an impact. And I can use my story because, you know what? I have to tell you, I've been a leader since 14 with my mother's death. And this interesting thing is, I just love making decisions at 14. For some reason, my dad just gave me a lot of leeway, if you will, because he was really busy taking care of 5 kids financially and taking care of other things. And he was very involved in his church. He was Episcopalian. And, you know, he was a treasurer for his church too, along with working a regular job, which was lengthy with long hours. And as a result of it, I liked it. So this is going to give me an opportunity to not only help the young ladies overcome their own limited beliefs and their self-doubts from my coaching opportunities that I will offer, but also giving them an opportunity fiscally for those that would qualify, that really are focused on moving on to university level to support their financial needs. Because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the young girls, they're smart, but they're not able, their families are not able, many of them are not able to provide that kind of financial support that they need. So my best friend in Jamaica, who happens to be retired also, is very committed, and she already has different opportunities to engage with them. And she did give me an opportunity to speak to one of the classes when I was there nearly 2 years ago, approximately 2 years ago. And so she is also, and she's a Christian, and she's also moved by this. She talks about it with tears in her eyes, because we really, it's all about moving it forward, offering opportunities for others to excel, and also having God use us with our strengths and our talents to make an impact in this world, which so very much needs us.
That's just such a compelling vision. And, you know, part of what I love about your story, Liz, is that it's such a great illustration of what, you know, the developmental psychologists talk about as generativity. You probably studied that at some point in your varied educational career. But generativity is really this desire in us, in a sense, to do something for the future, to do something for the next generations. And it's pretty common for folks in sort of our season of life to feel that. But what strikes me with you is you didn't just feel that and sort of put it on the shelf, or you took seriously what was stirring in your heart, and God's stirring to give back to these younger women who it sounds like have extraordinary potential, but they need someone like you and those who will team up with you to help them get through the financial challenges, as well as you said, the sort of mentoring and coaching with them. And but it's so much about now giving to the next generations, to young women who are, I mean, in many ways once what you were, maybe not quite as middle class as you were, but otherwise. So it's just great. It's a wonderful illustration of that. The other thing that really stands out to me is that you're really using different parts of you together. That is to say, your leadership part, your teaching and mentoring and coaching part you'll be doing, but then also your own financial capability part, and your ability to rouse others and get them excited about this work and draw into it. So that one of the things that happens for folk in the third who really move into a season of flourishing is they draw from the different parts of their life. It's not as if you're doing the same work that you used to do in the same way, but you're drawing from you and who you are in these different parts of you. It's just kind of wonderful to see it.
Oh, thank you. I just thought of a word, cafeteria style, it's like a little of this, a little of that, whatever,
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes prayer. And as we know, it's almost, it's interesting because as human beings, we sometimes talk to the Lord and we don't really stop, wait patiently, listen to him. And I've had to learn, like I mentioned earlier, I was not the most patient person in this world. I really was hard on myself. And that's why I had that nickname, Iron Woman, Margaret Thatcher, whatever, because I was hard. I had high expectations for, and I think it has a lot to do with losing my mother too, and having to set the bar high for my younger brothers. And I went through all that, but at the same time, we have to, I've learned that I have to stop and just be patient and listen to God and pay attention to the insights, because sometimes we have insights or intuition and we don't really pay attention to it,
That's a great word. Now you mentioned your church, which is also my church. That's how we know each other.
Yes.
And the Lord's Lighthouse. You talked about how God really tenderized your heart. You mentioned the Lord's Lighthouse is a ministry at First Presbyterian Hollywood to the folks in the neighborhood who are really struggling with homelessness. And one of the things I love about that ministry is it isn't only about helping with food or clothing. It's really meant to be holistic. Can you talk a little bit more about this health part of that you were involved with, and what that, and not only what you were able to do, but what that did in you?
Certainly. It was the Queen's Care Faith and Health Partnership. And Queen's Care is a clinic that was affiliated with Queen's Care Hospital. And the clinic was actually in Los Angeles. And they had a program which offered a parish nurse. And if I recall, Brenda Cox was our parish nurse at the time. Oh, I just love, maybe you know Brenda. She's lovely, and her husband, they both worshiped at Hollywood Press. And on Wednesdays they had, and sometimes more than once a week, they had a clinic, a medical clinic. And so the individuals in the community, people especially, and some of these folks may not have been homeless per se, they're not living on the street, but they needed, healthcare has been a challenge. And as you know, many people cannot afford healthcare. And sometimes you can't, if you don't have health insurance, you can't even go to the doctor. So Queen's Care provided healthcare, the screening and follow through, the vaccinations, and some of the processes that you can't get outside of the hospital system or in an established clinic would be offered in this Queen's Care clinic environment, which was held at the Lord's Lighthouse. So Brenda Cox was the individual. And then they had support like social services and other supports that worked with Brenda, and then Brenda had volunteers, meaning that my background was nursing, and then we had other individuals too that volunteered. And we had actually a health cabinet that met once a month. I actually chaired that health cabinet for 10 years. And we met because there are lots of other other churches that were affiliated with Queen's Care, also the health partnership. And so we would meet periodically and discuss programming and so forth. So it was really a great blessing for me to be part of that. But also there was a spiritual component. Pastor Chuck Sueda was involved with it, and he was also very involved and he had a passion, a wonderful passion for people in need, So it really gave a lot of us an opportunity to collaborate, but also open up our hearts. It really, when you spend time, if you take yourself away from your everyday life, your comfort zone, and move into an environment that's very threatening or in a situation where it puts you in an uneasy position, that's a learning opportunity. That's an opportunity, not an inconvenience to you. It's actually a positive for your life because it helps you to actually appreciate what God has done in your life, but also try to impact positively the lives of others.
Well, and I'm just so impressed that in part you were using your gifts and skills, but in a different place. So you weren't you were bringing your nursing background and your leadership background, your medical background, but offering that in a different way. It seems like so much of flourishing in life in general, but especially as we get into the third of life, is really looking at, so what has God given me? Experiences, gifts, talents, resources, relationships, and how can I steward these well? How can I use these well for God's purposes? Now, I have another question for you, which is, I know people who are in a season of life where we are, who do sometimes, they sort of get an idea like, wouldn't it be something if I could do this to help people, much like you have with the school. But I also know a lot of folk talk themselves out of it. Like, oh, well, I guess I really couldn't do that. Or the thought is there and the vision is there, and then it just, for some reason, it doesn't land. The plane doesn't land. And I'm wondering if you might have any encouragement for folks who maybe even as they're listening to this are thinking, wow, I sort of had a dream, but I haven't done anything with it. How might you encourage people?
Certainly. Well, first of all, I just feel it's not about us. It's not about us, it's about those people out there, other people. And so I feel that sometimes, and we all do this, if we just take the focus off of us and go focus on them. And then I think, you know what? There's a little saying that says, my people are waiting for me. There's so many, each and every one of us, the Lord has given us gifts, talents, that we're really here for God to use us. Here we're created for a purpose, on purpose, with a purpose. And so it's almost like I would like to encourage others to really search your heart, your soul, and say, Lord, you created me for a purpose. Pray and ask him, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing in this season of my life? It may be totally different, but he has a plan for you. And it's not that easy. It's easier said than done. We have to wait on the Lord. I don't know. It kind of worked out for me because of all of the challenges I had and spending time. I do a lot of inside, just talking to myself, and I do some personal inside work on my own, not through therapy. I just do a lot of soul searching. And I think it takes a lot of that soul searching. And then I feel too, one of the things is sometimes you need to make sure that you surround yourself with the right people. Because if your circle of influence is not supportive of you and is not spiritually driven, so to speak, it makes it a little difficult for you because you need support. and people that you can confide in, because sometimes you think you're going in the right direction, and you need people that love you, that will say, Liz, that's not what I'm seeing here, and to
Mm,
open and honest with you. But it's not something one can do on their own. They have to seek God first and have, I feel, a group of individuals, 2 or 3 people that are really supportive and are really wanting your best for you,
mm,
and then also I think it's really, we have to learn it's not easy, it's easier said than done again too, but we have to step out of that comfort zone. And it's not easy, that comfort zone. We're in this little comfort zone, and it seems like it's too comfortable. Sometimes we need to really we should take a leap of faith,
mm.
and all of this is, as I said, it's great conversation, but it's a process, and it takes courage. But one needs Christ and others to support
Mm.
the individual.
Wow. You know, had your life gone a different way, you could have been a preacher. I'm just saying. No, and I mean that as one who likes preaching, but
Yeah.
it's that's such a clear word of encouragement. And so maybe sometimes folk who begin to get a vision for something either don't have a community, or if they have it, they don't share that. There's a tendency to sort of keep it to yourself, or to think, I think a lot of people think, well, who am I, right? Who am I to do this? And so you said, first of all, I mean, I love it. It's not really about you, it's about them. It's about the people. So my colleague at Fuller Seminary, Scott Cormode, a professor of leadership, he says, leaders don't really have followers. What we have are people entrusted to our care.
Yes.
And so if you focus on the people entrusted to our care, and it may be that in certain seasons, they aren't yet really in your care, like these young women in this school aren't yet in your care, but you've sensed that God is entrusting them to your care in a special way. And so focusing on them and not on yourself seems to make a difference. And then you talk strongly about needing a community of support and discernment. And it's just, just such great wisdom there. Well, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but I want to be respectful both of your time and this. I wonder, not to put you on the spot, but I suppose I am. Is there anything else you feel like you'd like to share with folks? My guess is at this point, certain things will be stirring in people, and some will just feel affirmed. Like your story, it's kind of like their story, and they're excited. I mean, I know a woman in Arizona who worked in business for a long time and did really well with that. And when she retired, she just had a great passion for immigrants, and she just went for it and started, went out into that. And so I think if she were to hear this story, she'd just be feeling encouraged. There may be others who are thinking, wow, I wonder does God have anything he wants to do in and through me in this season? So any other word of encouragement, although you've given us so much already, but I want to give you one last shot.
So, I'm smiling when you say all this, because Charles Stanley, I mentioned earlier to you at another opportunity. I love Charles Stanley. He's a Baptist preacher, and I watch him on television. I've been on a cruise with him and so forth. And I remember this wonderful man of God says, there is no such thing as retirement. And we in our third part of our life, so stage of our life, it's like we have so much. All of us have gone through so much in life that we have so much to give back. So much to move things life forward. And it doesn't matter what you have done in your life career-wise. It doesn't matter whether you've never worked, you've been a housewife, or taking care of children, which is, outside work, outside of the home, because taking care of children is a lot of work. But it doesn't matter what the Lord has called you to do in the first and second season. He still has plans for your third season in your life. And I think the most important thing that I've recognized that works for me is that, first of all, be kind to oneself, be gentle with oneself, have compassion, recognize that you go through different stages, Many of us are challenged with health conditions. Many of us are challenged with responsibilities. But the Lord's not finished with us. He still wants us to make a difference in the world. And there's so many people out there that really need our help or support in various ways. And I mentioned earlier, the Lord created us for a purpose, with a purpose. And it's up to us. We are really his children. And it's really not about us. It's about how can God direct my life to make a difference in this world? And I know that we all want to leave this world a better place. So I would encourage each and everyone that's listening to this recording to search your soul, your heart, pray and ask the Lord to open your eyes and direct your path, and learn the importance of waiting patiently, because it's not something that any of us can. I can't do it. I had to learn how to do it. And it's a work in progress for me. But just ask the Lord to guide and direct your path, and then talk to people that really love you and have your best interests at heart, and surround yourself with a few positive, supportive friends, people of God, who can really help to guide you and support you when it's not going to be a smooth journey. There are going to be ups and downs, peaks and valleys, but your colleagues or your community is there for you. And we know the Lord never leaves you. He's always beside you. He lifts you up. When you fall, he picks you up. And trust in the Lord. And with all things are possible if we just have faith and trust in him.
Amen to that. Well, Liz, this has been wonderful. And thank you for sharing your story and your vision and many pieces of wisdom along the way. I think there's just a lot that will be encouraging to folk. And one of the things I really want to do, and I hope we can stay in touch, because I'd love to know more about how things happen as you move forward and what happens with these young women you're going to be investing in. So if you don't mind, at some point, I want to circle back and just catch up and learn. And but I'm really thankful for your willingness to share out of your life and your wisdom to encourage others, because I think you're so right. I think God is not done with us, that there is such great potential if we're open to what God wants to do.